All right. Well, today we are excited to have this conversation as part of the Everyday Women Summit with the theme of Where Women Gather. And my name is Candice Neveu, and I am a certified coach. I'm also an educator with 20 years in post-secondary, a TEDx speaker, and I run my own coaching business, Candice Neveu Coaching, where I guide high-achieving women who are on the edge of their next level to transform themselves, their self-doubt, into self-leadership and soul-led action. I live in Sooke, BC, which is on Vancouver Island, and I live with my two children, who's 16 and 20. Um, Today's topic about women in gathering is really important because sisterhood is the survival guide to life. Children, spouses, jobs, even dreams, they'll come and go. And sometimes friends will too. But if we had to live a certain chapter without one friend or a support system, what would have happened to us? In this summit, we are going to amplify the power of community and smash the paradigm of the lone wolf. Behind each everyday woman is another one cheering her on, calling her out, and making sure she stays connected to her vision and her mission. We remind each other of who we are becoming, especially when we can't see it ourselves. And I am really excited today to be joined by my co-speaker, Sheila Eggert, and we're going to be talking about the role of community and the everyday women who make a difference in our lives and how we receive and give support. And I would love to invite you, Sheila, to introduce yourself. Well, how would you like
Great.
people to know you?
Thanks, Candice. So I am a former corporate executive and New Yorker who, at the age of 57, stopped living my life by the scripts that were handed to me and completely transformed my life to one that's authentic, purposeful, and fulfilling. Um, uh, a little after that transformation started, I moved across the country, where I now live on the beach in Santa Monica, California. And I'm the mom of two amazing adult daughters, and I'm a transformation coach. I'm a best-selling author. I'm a TEDx speaker and a cancer thriver, and the founder of Sheila Eggert Coaching.
Fabulous. I'm so excited to have our conversation.
Me too.
So let's dive in. When you think about your community, so like friends, family, coworkers, mentors, even, who are your different circles? Like what makes them important to you?
So, first of all, I think we start with the fact that community and the need to be in community is a basic human need and part of
Mm-hmm.
our original survival response, right? It was,
Yeah.
there was a time when being part of a community meant your whether you lived or died. And so this needing to be part of communities is just so central to who
Mm-hmm.
we are. So for me, there's sort of the obvious, right? Family, friends, my neighborhood community, coworkers. But what I found for me is that there is this special group of friends who are the ones who will challenge me to grow,
Mm-hmm.
who will tell me the truth, I have a group of three other women, and, we met through a coaching program we were part of, and we set aside an hour a week and we have a messenger chat and we get together and we coach each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I'm pointing out that distinction is because what I found in my life is that our families, people at work, and even many of our friends, in the most well-meaning, loving way, provide us support in the way that's familiar to them.
Yeah.
And and so this group of friends where, I'm not gonna, if something challenging is going on in my life, they're not the ones that are gonna, jump in and take your side, against, whoever or whatever did you wrong. And so while I have value for every community and the love and support I get from all of them, this particular community for me and the areas and the circles where I found that kind of support is what really helps me grow. What
Yeah,
about
I
you?
love yeah, I love that. I love that. Like I have families and friends and colleagues, I will call them more than coworkers because I find that being working for myself now, I'm not really in too many workplaces as much. But I really take your point around having that sort of inner circle of sorts, the friends who you can rely on to. And for me, when you were talking, I was thinking about my particular, I have a couple of circles. I have sort of one for my personal life where I have some really close friends who, like your circle, will they hold a mirror up to me because I find that for myself, it can be really hard for me to see myself clearly.
Hmm.
And some of my own personal work has been to sort of undo past conditioning around value and self worth. And so, while I've made great strides in that area, I still need to have the mirror held up on occasion. And they will also challenge me. They will call me on my crap essentially. But I also have that similar circle with some colleagues who I also met during a coaching program, and so we have this as well. And I think that's really powerful because if everyday women hopefully are we evolve and we grow, and sometimes on that journey we are going to rub up against some of the folks in the other circles who aren't maybe ready for us to grow and change. And so being able to have circles and places where we can that support who we're becoming is so important, to be able to feel like we can bloom and blossom, and also to navigate the friction that can come up as a result of that. So
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think about it as you were talking, is it's friends, colleagues who don't have expectations of you
yeah.
and how you're going to show up. And so, our family, some of our close friends, like as a parent, your children have expectations from you,
Mm-hmm.
your partner has expectations, and to have this group that, this community that is just about each me and my growth,
Mm-hmm.
um, is just so important
Mm-hmm.
because for the most part, we're thinking about what we need to do for others.
Yes, that is so well put. So that actually is a really great segue to the next thing I'd like to talk with you about, which is that we are often really great about supporting other people, but not always great about allowing ourselves to be supported. So I'm curious for you, because I know I've struggled with this. How have you learned to allow support, and what difference has that made in your life? Um, and I'm curious because you have a very interesting story yourself. So I'd love to hear how this affects you.
Yeah, I love this question because it also gave me a chance to reflect, because I was always the strong one. That was my identity. I was the strong one. I was the one that everyone else relied on, and I could stay calm in a crisis and help everyone else. And it was truly my identity. And then on top of that, as a child, I was bullied by my older sister.
Mm,
And my mom, again, in the most well-meaning, loving, supportive way, would tell me, don't let her see you're upset because it'll just be worse. And so that just kind of reinforced that sort of mask of always acting like everything's okay, no matter how I was feeling on the inside. And so when people would, say, how are you doing? I'm fine, fine. No matter what was going on, my life could be falling apart, but the answer was fine. When, do you need any help? Nope, nope, I got it, because I prided myself on that. And it was so much a part of my identity. And I reflected back and I realized that earlier in my life, I did ask for help, but not from people who would just do it for me. I would pay people for help.
Mm,
So where a lot of, new moms would, try to do it all themselves, I would hire and pay a housekeeper. So I didn't have to, because I was working and had small children, pay babysitters, to get some free time to take care of myself. So I did ask for help, but there was still that belief that the only people that are going to help me or
mm,
if I pay them for the
yeah.
service. So the shift started when I started doing this mindset work, but like when it really took a 180 was when I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mhm.
And I had just left a marriage. My marriage had ended. I was living in New York City by myself for the first time since I was 24 years old. And it was during the pandemic. So this was in 2021. And so even though my daughters didn't live too far away, you know, the whole for them to come and visit me, it was a big deal.
Mhm.
Um, and so during that journey, I learned to ask for, but I don't even think it was asked for. It was I learned to receive. I
That's a,
learned,
yes, yes. Say more. Sorry.
yeah, no, no, I know. You're like, that feels good, right? 100%.
Mhm.
So it wasn't that other people didn't offer or want to help me. It was that I wasn't open to receive.
Mhm.
So in this case, when people were, calling, sending gifts, telling, asking my daughters, like, here's what you need to do to support me. So somebody needs to be at the hospital to pick me up, from chemo and come and stay with me for a day. And that was, before it would have felt like a huge ask,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh my God, because then they had to isolate for 4 or 5 days before and test and all of that. And I was just like, well, I'm not going to be alone and I'm not going to, pay somebody to come and stay with me.
Yeah.
And even people's well wishes and calls and gifts that people sent me, just that ability to receive, I mean, it expanded so much during that. And I'm curious what your story is around this, because I do find that men very often we need to find ourselves in some sort of crisis before we just go, okay, I can't do it all myself.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So much resonated there. That ability to receive is huge. For me, I, like you, was seen as the I was the eldest daughter in my family. I was the one who handled all the stuff. I did all the right things. I was very independent, and it was a point of pride almost for me, and that I could do it all on my own. And I I would accept help if, like, when I think it started to shift for me a little bit when I started to have my kids. And my husband at the time, he was in the military, so he was away a lot. So I was on my own. And so if my mom came over to help, I often just let her help. And so little by
Yeah.
little that was able to happen. Um, but it really wasn't until my mother was diagnosed, or well, she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and then eventually, passed away from it after quite a fight. And so dealing with the grief of that and having to take care of my stepdad, who was also has a lot of chronic health issues, I got to a point where I actually could not do it all. I had young kids and one going into middle school, and my husband was partly away, and like it was just something had to give, and that was what it was. So I started to shift into believing, well, if someone makes an offer, I'm going to trust that they want to help. So I'm just going to say,
Yes.
okay, this is what I need, right? And that was in itself a bit of a journey for me of trusting that they're not saying it to be nice, but that they actually
Mhm.
want to serve. And I did a lot of put yourself in their shoes, like, because I love to give. So I thought, well, if I think, oh, I would have loved to help them, of course I would cook them something. Well, maybe they're thinking the same thing. So I'm stopping them from feeling the warmth of giving to me. So why I need to get out of my own way here, right? Because what I was doing was assuming things about them, right? And so, yeah, it now I am more willing to ask for help. I'm definitely better at receiving help than I used to
Yeah.
be. And I give back. So I know that if um, there was an element of where I would give and give and give a lot, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, thinking that but part of that ability of giving is also to be able to receive, like you said, to be able to say, hey, you are also allowed to receive. And oftentimes people feel important being able to support you in those ways. And so as a giver, it's actually a gift to let them honor you like that. So
Yes. Oh my God, that is such a good point. And there is actually research that shows that the person who is giving actually gets sometimes more
mhm,
than the person who's receiving. So I love that shift in perspective. Like actually you're doing a disservice to them by
mhm,
not accepting their
mhm.
offers.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting, like we're talking about circles and supporting and in the context of community itself. And so there's this concept that our community reflects back to us something about who we are becoming. So I'm curious to know, um, what have people closest to you taught you about yourself?
So that's an interesting one because I really do believe in the community and people around us being a mirror.
Mhm,
And for most of my life, I was wearing a mask
mhm,
of who do I need to be? So I wasn't authentically myself
mhm,
in communities or relationships, whether
mhm,
it was my marriage, whether it was friendships, whether it was at work. So I was, even though I was in HR, I am a highly intuitive, relationship driven person, not at all type A, working at an investment bank for
oh,
27 years. And so you can imagine, and this is from the time I was young, I got the messages that the way I was, didn't like fit in. And so I was constantly molding myself to who I thought I needed to
mhm,
be accepted, safe, loved, fill in the blanks.
mhm,
And so what I have since learned is that I felt very lonely in those communities or
mhm,
relationships because I wasn't myself. And
mhm,
so what was being mirrored back to me was not meeting my needs and not
mhm,
making me feel, connected and, in that community or that relationship.
mhm,
So that realization of, oh, that's just mirroring back to me what I'm putting out, and that if I don't bring my authentic self to whatever that community is, it's never going to feel good. in that community. So I can be in that community and still feel lonely, or I can be in that relationship and still feel isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I'm
been the
curious.
biggest mirror for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that people shift maybe naturally too, we all sort of adjust a little bit depending on the different circles and groups that we're in a little bit, but you're speaking to the bigger point of really what I sort of call like dimming your light, not being your authentic
Mhm.
self in those circles. I'm curious, just as an extension to what you were saying, is did you ever have an experience where you were in one of those communities and you noticed that you were not being your authentic self and realized that you wanted to bring your true self to the table and it wasn't as well received? And how did you handle that?
Um, Yeah, I think in my last corporate job I started shifting, and I do think it was reflected back to me. But also what I found was the more myself I was being in relationships, the more it just didn't feel good to me anymore.
Yeah.
Like I felt that rub of, it's not a good fit anymore. And so there were relationships that fell away because of that, that just once I started being myself, to me, it didn't feel good. But yeah, and for sure, I would say in relationships when I started, and we're talking about things like setting simple boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And like in my marriage, for example, and setting a boundary that, wasn't any huge thing, and and having that being looked at as that I was being aggressive, and realizing, and one of the things that I realized with boundaries in particular, because that's a lot of what this work is, right? We evolve to like, here's what I'm available for, and here's what I'm not available for. And what I have found is that the people who benefited the most from the version of you that had no boundaries, the version of you that kind of molded yourself to fit in,
mm-hmm.
are going to scream the loudest when
Yeah.
you start to change. And it can be some, you know, subtle things like, just being in a group of friends who complain all the time, and then you just stop complaining or you're not part of it. And it's kind of like, well, who are you? Like, what are we supposed to talk about?
Yeah.
And just kind
Yeah.
of realizing, oh,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I've had that same experience. I think a lot of women, I mean, I suppose to generalize, but I think a lot of us conform to how we're expected to behave in a lot of situations. And we can get the messages that who we are is not good, right, appropriate, pick your adjective. And I had that
mhm,
experience myself. My communities, I've actually, my aunt just said to me today in text because I was saying that we were doing this interview, and she said, "Oh, that'll be great. We always said you were born talking, and there, which is sweet. In some ways, my family can see me really well, but interestingly as well, I also found in some of my family groups and in my friend groups that if I were to bring my full light to bear, it often wasn't received well, and so then I learned to dim and to fit in. And like you, as I um, after my mom passed away, that has a way of reorganizing, and I had just turned 40 at that point as well, so it was like a new decade and this big life change, and I started to step more into how I wanted my communities to look. So I started to lead more with who I was. Some
mhm,
adjusted well to that, and others did not. And so some things gave away. I do have, I have a couple of friends who see me very clearly. So that's a community that, and probably similar to the other communities we were talking about earlier, where the mirror gets held up in a supportive way,
Yeah.
and shone back. But I think that we often get to know ourselves better when we are in community with others, because even things that create friction, they're opportunities for us to get curious about why was that weird, like what just happened there, and to
Right, right.
to be able to go, oh, that needs to be a boundary, or I just self-abandoned in that moment, like, and so yeah, it's really, really interesting. um how do you We were talking earlier about giving and kind of and being able to receive, and so how do you show up for your community, and what does giving back to look like for you, especially nowadays? Like how does reciprocity look for you these days?
Well, for me, being a coach is who I am. It's not just my job.
I
And
love that
so,
you said that.
yeah.
I feel the same way.
I know, and I don't know if it's cliche at this point, but I don't care. So that's, it is who I am, and I find myself in every interaction I have, whether it's, with the barista making coffee at the coffee shop, and so I look at giving back in terms of my energy and my light and how I interact with people in this world. And so, whether I'm run into a neighbor while we're walking our dogs and she's going through a particular challenge, and I just end up coaching her, as opposed to other people who would, commiserate and, oh, that's terrible that they did that or whatever. And then I just find myself telling her what the truth really is and helping her to regulate her nervous system so that she's not feeling bad about it. And
Mhm.
then, I walk my dog on the beach in the morning, and I would say at least once a week, I run into someone, the dogs start playing, and I end up in a conversation with someone and tell them what I do. And they're like, oh my God, I could use that. And it ends up being a conversation that really brightens up their day, because it's so many people are going through, as you said, like especially these days, a tough moment.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on in the world to deregulate our nervous system. And I just found that, the more I can help be just by being me and
Mhm.
not dimming my light and not going into like, oh, well, everyone else is negative and complaining, so I'll just jump on the bandwagon. I just do that naturally with everyone I come into contact with. And it's funny because this week I did a couple of breakthrough beach coaching sessions. So I was like, you know what? I do this on the beach anyway. And I participated in some events at LA Tech Week a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to raffle off these breakthrough beach coaching sessions. And my daughter, who's a genius brand marketing strategist, was like, Mom, that is brilliant. Like combining the two things that you love to do, walking on the beach and coaching. And the women got so much out of it. And for me, it didn't feel like work. It just
Mhm.
felt
Oh,
like
it's
this
awesome.
is what I do. So yeah, so I think for me, that's where I feel I can contribute the
Mhm.
most
Mhm.
to my neighbors, family, friends, humanity, is just really being that, and it's funny because I used to say, oh, I'm the one that can, calm people down and I got it all together and I'm the strong one, but I view it differently now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great. I think for me with reciprocity, I also very similarly do similar things to you, right? Like I realize that I am a coach. And I come at coaching from a teaching background. So I'm either a teacher or a coach in some capacity my entire life. So it is
Right.
also who I am.
Yeah.
And my best friend likes to tease me sometimes if I start talking in some particular way. She's like, "Oh, you've got your teacher hat on." I like to share knowledge. I like to educate. And there's that's one way that I also give back. I also like in small ways in my community, like I try to model um, being compassionate, being able to see people, bringing some sunshine, trying to like help them, not necessarily get bogged down in, yes, empathy, of course, but also where do they have agency? So that because the world can be such a place, and so being able to help
Yeah,
them find some peace in the pockets and where they have agency is something that
yeah.
I do pretty regularly. And yeah, I think just there's something that, presence in particular with the people in my life, as much as
Mm,
I can.
such a
I try
gift.
to be present and to speak to them in ways that show that I'm listening and that I care and like I ask questions about them because I feel that um, with the way the world is going so quickly and everything is kind of off the corner of our desks or out of the side of our hands these days, giving someone your undivided attention, even for 5 minutes,
Mhm.
is a gift. So,
Yes,
you
yes.
know,
I love that. I totally agree. And yeah, just it's almost like just giving someone a respite from the chaos,
yeah,
right? Just
yeah.
to
Well, and I often will too, I'm not I've reached a point in my own development where I do not sweat stuff usually. Like
Mhm.
nothing is a crisis, generally speaking. And so but there's still that energy of, a lot of people carry that energy with them. And so I try to be the person that doesn't, it's no big deal. Like, okay, you're 5 minutes late. It's fine. I've got 15 books on my phone, I can read or I can look out the window or talk to somebody standing next to me. I'm not bothered. And so being able to have that opportunity to give someone the chance to just breathe and not feel like they've made a mistake, you know,
Right.
is is something. It's important. And especially for
Beautiful.
women who are juggling a lot of things and trying to please a lot of people and all of that.
Right. Yeah.
So our last question here, more or less, is it's a big one. So let's see how we do. Why do you believe community is necessary for women, especially everyday women, to thrive? Why is it important or
Yeah.
necessary?
I think this is big, but I feel like we've been answering it to a certain extent for sure. I mean, the first and most obvious is we can't do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we need the support, we need the community, and we
Mm-hmm.
need the mirrors. So for our growth, right? I think any one of us as part of this summit, anyone who's tuning into the summit, you're doing it because you want to grow.
Mm-hmm.
You want to, reach that next level, whether it's more fulfillment or ease or joy or success, whatever that looks like for you. We are born to grow. And that's really hard to do when we're not in community. And you mentioned before community being a mirror. And, I use the example of people who like get mindfulness, right? And they can, go off on, a meditation retreat or, meditate in the morning and be all zen or, whatever, achieve that state. But it's really through relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right, that we really grow, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's where the triggers might come up, and all of that. And to have a community that is as much in it for your growth as their own is it's just priceless because we don't always get that.
No.
That sort of unconditional love and support to be able to really be ourselves, say what's going on, say what, the wheels are falling off. I'm just like, oh, I'm having a
Yeah.
day. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, we also know this is part of the survival instinct. We also know that from the research and the movies that have come out about the blue zones where, more people live to be 100, one of the common themes across that is being part of community
Hmm.
and not
Hmm.
being isolated. And so for me, especially for women who are trying to, hold it all and juggle it all and, and look good, and like make it look like it's easy. Um, yeah, this is the only way for us to really thrive.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
for me, it's and as we were talking about, when you're getting that resistance show up to your next level of growth,
Hmm.
uh, you can very easily be sitting by yourself and, and buying into whatever your mind is telling you that, is a lie, but to have a community to really support you and, in working through the discomfort and growing and getting to that next level. I mean, to me, I can't even imagine where I would be without those communities.
Yeah, 100%. I love a lot of this. I think that one thing I'm going to add to that for myself, because I agree with everything you said, is that sometimes I think we find ourselves in communities that do not help us thrive. And I think that one of the important things is that as dynamic growing women, and even if you're not in an active phase of self-development, by nature of time, by virtue of time and just our cycles and the way that we work, you are going to evolve, however incrementally. And I think it's really, I know for me it matters that sometimes in my life I've had to find new communities and new circles that support who I am becoming. And that's the great thing about community, is that it is, um, there are lots of them. And with the way the world is, they can be in person, they can be online. Some of the folks that I am most close with are on our virtual. I've been getting the great experience the last couple of years of being able to actually meet them in real life, which is
That's
such an
great.
amazing experience. Yeah, it's mind blowing. It's so fun. Um, but I think that we as a species are very much community centered, right? Like humans were our group creatures, and
Yeah,
so it is intrinsic to our ability to thrive, and thriving is not the same as surviving. I think that that's sort of the thing to kind of
yeah,
keep in mind, right? Like you can have a community where you are surviving, you've got all your basic needs met, they're okay, but you don't feel lit up every day. You don't feel heard, you don't feel seen. And so that's where you're finding communities of people that reflect back to you, that give back to you, that lift you up, that you're excited to see and be part of, and is key to thriving. So I think it's worth evaluating sometimes. Am I really thriving here too?
yeah. What I love about that is, it's so interesting, right? Because that whole survival mechanism of like being part of a community, because you couldn't survive
Yeah.
at some point in our evolution, you could not survive without your community. And these days, you can survive without the community. You can buy your groceries, rent an apartment, buy a home. So your basic survival needs are met. But thriving is a whole different story. So beautifully.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that's why there's a loneliness epidemic. And I think that, we have to recognize that, at least in Western culture, that we have a strong push towards individuation, individualism, which
Hmm.
is is, not, I don't think, doing us any service. So being part
No.
of community is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So, where can people find you on the interwebs, Sheila, if they want to find out more about you and
Yeah.
what you have going on? Maybe if they're
Yeah.
around California to go for a beach walk.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm Sheila Eggert on all the socials. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn because I have such a strong network from my 38 years in corporate, but also Facebook and Instagram, Sheila Eggert. Um, and my website, to make it really easy, SheilaEggert.com. There you can find links to my book, The Power of Living Unscripted, my TEDx, all of that is there. And there's also a free video learning and an audio of a guided visualization that you can access on my website, which is really supportive in, setting that vision, right? Because that's where it all comes, right? What's pulling us versus pushing us to grow.
That's
What about you,
fabulous.
Candice?
So I'll just keep it easy. You can find me on the internet at improveyourself.ca, where you'll find links to all of my places. I do have a LinkedIn under Candice Neveu, and I am on Instagram at Candice Neveu _coach. Where I love to just post in my stories most often. But on my, the best way to kind of keep in touch with me is to sign up for my newsletter. And right now, actually, for the month of November, I'm running a series on navigating your doubt landscape. And so I'm having a lot of fun with that. But yeah, that's fabulous. So thank you, Sheila. I've really
Great.
enjoyed this conversation and for you sharing about your people and your circle and everything. And
Yeah. Thanks.
yeah, I think it's such an important conversation to have because it's easy to think that we're alone, especially, when we are so busy and people have their heads down and are in their little pockets. And for every woman listening, we invite you to look at your own circle with gratitude and to ask yourself, how can I let myself be supported a little more and to receive a little more? And how can I support others in small, everyday ways? Because at the end of the day, community is where our strength multiplies. And together, which is deeply, deeply true, we are unstoppable. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Candice.
Take care.